And my microphone is live. The Land and Water and UW Extension meeting will come to order. Was the meeting properly announced?
Yes, it was.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call and let's see. Supervisor Mons is here, Supervisor Wimmer is here, Supervisor McLaughlin. Not sure on Supervisor Krug. Doreen is also here, Doreen Olson. And of course I am. I'd entertain a motion to approve our agenda as written. First by Supervisor Mons. Do I have a second? Second by Supervisor Wimmer. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed, say nay. The agenda is approved. Has everyone had the opportunity to review the April 4th, 2023 committee meeting minutes? Are there any corrections? If there are no corrections, the minutes are approved. Public participation, is there anyone signed up for public participation?
No, there is not.
All right, is there any correspondence for the committee to consider?
No, there is not.
All right. Was everyone able to access the sheet that corresponds to Land and Water and UWX projects under the project status report? I'm seeing looks, nods. Yeah, okay. Are there any questions?
Is this going to be monthly? This is going to be on what?
I'm not exactly sure. Is it monthly now that we're going to have that?
Yeah, Kyle mentioned that he would like it as a standing item on, I think, every committee's agenda, is my
Okay.
understanding.
Okay, thank you. So just to put my cheaters on. Just to review, Easton Dam is on there, 14-mile watershed plan implementation, private well testing program, remove concrete rebar from the lake bed of Rosha Cree, student government day sale, and teen outreach program. We're all listed on the project status report. So if you have problems reaching that, reach out and we'll figure it out. Okay. Moving on to 10, meeting times and dates. I have a monthly calendar in front of me. Did everyone else bring their schedules? And do we wish to throw out times? Are we in favor of evening meetings? We need, go ahead, Supervisor Mons.
I asked this question a month ago with you. I had a conversation regarding this,
Yes,
and I don't know that we have a lot of citizens that have asked for this. I think the county, because other meetings are being held in the evening, I think that they're asking for the evening meeting. I don't know that we've had issues. I asked you whether or not that we had a lot of,
I've been contacted by participants of the public.
and how many? I mean,
You know, I haven't actually, done a tally. But I would say there's interest. Looking back at the rules, we have a 9:30, I think, and a 6 p.m. for meeting times. I don't think we've ever actually applied that to many of them, but go ahead.
just continuing, if I may, during correspondence, if in fact, let's say that I was unable to attend a meeting,
Correct.
would there be correspondence at this point from a citizen? Is that where it would come in? If that person is unable to attend, they give that information to Dustin or Land and Water, and then it becomes part of the agenda. Would that be under correspondence, or would that be someplace else?
I guess I don't understand the question, Supervisor Mons. Are you saying if someone is unable to attend from the public,
Correct. And if they had,
they show up?
I understand, but if a person is working and can't,
No,
And-
they
and you-
basically don't show up, or they are able to join via Zoom if if that's available to them.
Even then the final is the fact that then are most of the issues that a citizen would bring up, wouldn't that happen in the office? Wouldn't that happen at Land
I'm,
and Water as far as shoreline protection, grants, the ability to do something on your property, then spilling over into planning and zoning?
I think that would be with planning and zoning. This is land and water, so we're talking county forest,
Shoreline,
shoreland, but that's more planning and zoning. There's other things. UW Extension runs a variety of programs. If someone has questions on that, they can't reach UW Extension during the day, they might attend a meeting in the evening. There's potential for outreach, I guess, and that's from the public attending, is my understanding. So,
and that's, again, I said final, but, and I know that you had your hand up and I just, one more thing.
go ahead.
But on that basis, what would they come to the meeting for then? What would they need approval with the exception of just finding information out at Land and Water, a county meeting or a committee meeting at Land and Water? What would they come here like they did with a county meeting for a referendum, for an ordinance, or those type of things where a person has done that? They've submitted an ordinance or some change to Land and Water. They want to see what the committee votes on that, or the county supervisors would vote on that. What would come to this meeting that we would have to have a citizen participation to vote on? Is there anything that we can think of here that we would have to do on that basis?
Well, I'm not exactly sure if I can actually talk details, but let's just spitball. County forest, if something affects a landowner, they would certainly be able to come forward. For the drone policy, if someone is concerned with how we're setting that policy, they could come forward and address the committee. UW Extension, if they have concerns with the program or whatever, they could certainly come forward at the committee level. Could they address this outside of the committee? Yes. Would the committee be aware of it? Perhaps. If they come forward at the committee, I would assume that everybody here would be aware of it. So just. You bet. Doreen?
I'm going to say that I am opposed to going to night meetings for a few reasons. Number one is we need to be respectful of our employees' time, especially in this day and age with the shortage of workers. If we're going to start requiring nighttime, especially the young professionals, they might choose to go to a job where they don't have to attend night meetings. I'm sure they accept that there are some night meetings that are required, but we need to be respectful of people's time, of their time, number one. Number two, I was going to also ask is how much input, where did this come from requesting night meetings? Hold on, I had another point. Oh, the other thing I could say is that we have, this county is primarily now retirement and seasonal. So do we have weekend meetings to accommodate them? That's kind of where I'm coming from. And to be honest, I have a teenage son. I only have so many hours he goes to school, and I don't know that I'm willing to give up my evenings. So maybe occasionally, but that's kind of where I'm at.
Thank you. Thank you both. Anybody else?
Madam Chair,
Supervisor Romer?
I would suggest that we continue on with the 1 PM meetings. If there are requests otherwise that people are prevented from public participation, we can kind of monitor that. I don't know how that all gets done when somebody wants to be on board. Is it through the county clerk that they want to be on the agenda?
For public participation?
Yes.
Yes, it's down
Okay,
at the bottom
maybe
of
they
the,
could monitor that, but I would say for now, I think some good points were brought up to continue on with the 1 PM meeting. Thank
we
you.
have also, let's see. Good. public participation or participants are not from the public on the Zoom call either. So, okay, so I guess we will enter, do we need a motion? I don't think so. So shall we take a vote? I think 2/3 vote to continue going on as we're going at the 1 PM on the first Tuesday of the month. I have, anybody? Aye, okay, 2, 3. All right, I'm fine either way. I'm at your discretion. So let's continue on at the 1 o'clock. Is anyone voting against it? Supervisor McLaughlin? Okay,
I will say, if there is a need for a night meeting for whatever reason, let's bring it forth and I wouldn't have an issue going to a night meeting. But I think on a regular basis, the need is not there. So
yes, Supervisor McLaughlin. Thank you, Doreen.
Morning, day or night. So that, I mean, not to drag everybody back, but I spent a hell of a lot of time at night meetings and I was trying to get everybody on board with comprehensive planning, numerous other things. And I was on board. So I don't know if things are getting so different and COVID and everything that
Thank you, Supervisor McLaughlin. Okay, so I would say that the majority voted to keep it at 1. So we will move forward with 1 with the flexibility in mind to change it if we need to. Thank you. All right. Hold on.
Works down here.
Erie Extension Director Report. Pat?
Hi, good afternoon. I'm excited to have a microphone back here. Great, good deal. I feel like I'm in the back row. Anyway, so a couple updates. We're short staffed today because Sheila and Evan both take part in their associations related to their professional organizations. And so they're at a conference in Appleton today. So they submitted their reports in writing, and then they sent a letter to Melissa indicating, or an email to Melissa indicating if there were questions or concerns, that we would get those to them and then we could answer those next time. We did have, thank you to Jody for being part of the interview process to screen our applicants for the regional livestock educator position. I have a verbal offer accepted. So once, I can't tell you who until I have that in writing, but it looks like it could be a mid-May start. And that would be an individual working on livestock emphasis in Adams, Washera, and Green Lake counties. And then that's where I'm at. And the project status update, I will be sure that we're always updating that. I had not gotten that communication from Kyle. So I'm glad to hear that from Land and Water so we can do that as well. Any questions?
Thank you, Pat. Any questions for Pat? Does not look like it. Thank you, Pat. The educators report was attached. Are there any questions for the UW Extension staff that are here today? I have one. Location, both. Is that virtual and physical on Evan's report? He has. Hold
Oh,
on.
I
let
see.
me-
So, and an in-person,
Location type, both.
it's on the second bullet point, Linda.
He has it actually on almost every single one of his bullet points.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it's on, yes, almost on every one.
Oh, okay. So our support staff, our part-time support staff, Laura, worked on this report this time because it's good to know all the skill sets. And one of the things that reports that when the educator puts the information into the system, he indicates or she indicates, is it a county thing or is it a local thing? And he did click both. So then when you're doing the report, to not confuse the people reading it, you're supposed to remove that. It's not that it's bad information for you to have, it's just that you don't need to have it, right? So he was doing his work in Adams County for Adams County residents. So we
Okay.
will work with her. It's always good to have people point that out, right?
No, no problem.
Full of learning lessons.
Thank you very much. Okay, are there any other questions? All right, seeing none, we will move on. Thank you all for your content of your reports. I do appreciate it. Financials, did everyone have the opportunity to review the financials? Are there any questions? All right. We are moving on to land and water. We are at the bat habitat conservation item. And I think Sarah from the DNR was on.
Yep, I am here.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
We've got volume very
Oh.
high here, so. that's-
Sorry.
Dustin, you don't want to touch that one? No. Rich said, so I think it's Melissa. I think it's here. So. Sarah, could you try talking again?
Yeah, how does this sound?
A little better, but we're still gonna adjust.
Okay.
Thank you, guys. Try one more time.
How does this sound?
I think a little better, more pleasant on the ears. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. Would you like me to start just by giving a little background here about this?
I would love it.
Okay. So my name is Sarah Herrick, and I am the forestry liaison at the Bureau of Natural Heritage Conservation at Wisconsin DNR. I've also asked my colleague Heather Karaka to join us today. She is our new BAT HCP coordinator. But she's also a longtime member of our Wisconsin DNR's BAT team and one of our experts on BAT ecology and biology. So this project, the Lake States Forest Management BAT HCP started about 8 years ago when northern long-eared bats were listed as federally threatened by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And at that time, when they listed the northern long-eared bat, I mean Fish and Wildlife Service, they indicated that forest management was a potential source of take for bat species. And that's because during the summer, when the bats are not hibernating, they roost in trees. And there's a period of time during the summer when their new pups can't fly, that they're very vulnerable to the cutting of their roost trees and stuff like that. So the Fish and Wildlife Service determined that forest management was a potential source of take. And that's problematic because if northern long-eared bat were to become listed as endangered, which it recently has, then any take of an endangered species is prohibited. So as a result, this DNR, the state of Wisconsin, we needed to get an incidental take permit so that we could continue forest management. And so we collaborated with the Michigan DNR and the Minnesota DNR to develop the Lake States Forest Management Bat Habitat Conservation Plan. And a habitat conservation plan is basically it's a part of applying for an incidental take permit. And so that process took many years because it's quite complicated. And we recently received our state incidental take permit at the end of January. And as part of that, we can extend our incidental take coverage to some of our partners who do forest management in the state. And that basically includes the county forest system, large landowners who do a lot of management on their lands. So right now I've been working with Heather and I have been working with a lot of the county foresters. In Adams County, I've been working with Carolyn Prowl. I hope I said that right. To get the county forests that are interested in applying covered by our intake permit. And so that what's involved in that is there's an application. There's no cost to becoming covered. The ongoing work of that would be that every year we would need an annual we have a annual report worksheet that would have to be submitted to us because we have to make annual report to the Fish and Wildlife Service. And so the way that it would impact forest management on your state forest would be that you would have to implement the conservation measures that are in the Habitat Conservation Plan. And for forest management, that is a buffer around known maternity roost trees and known hibernacula, and then implementing retention guidelines for like snags and large trees. And those can be either from the silviculture handbook, chapter 24 of our silviculture handbook, or a few of the counties I know have their own retention guidelines that have been approved by the department. So those are acceptable as well. I don't believe Adams County has any known roost trees or hibernacula either within or adjacent to your county forest lands. So I wouldn't expect those conservation measures to impact you. There's also a few measures around prescribed burning and the creation and maintenance of permanent forest roads and recreational trails. And those activities are activities related to tree cutting, not like gravel spreading and things like that. I hope that provides enough of a background, and Heather and I are happy to answer any questions you have or hear discussion.
Thank you, Sarah. Supervisor Mons has a question for you.
Good afternoon. We did quite a portion of a last month's meeting on this item. And this is the way that I understand it, by agreeing, Adams County agreeing to this and signing the, I don't know, document or whatever you want to call it. I'm sorry,
The
the
resolution.
resolution. We gain protection by that. That if we follow the measures and we're proven that we followed the measures, or our land and water department has followed measures, and something has happened where there's some dead bats laying on the ground, that if we did that, that we would not be held responsible. Is that correct?
Yes, so you would have incidental take coverage. So if something happened, if you were following the measures, you were covered by the permit, a tree was cut and some bats were killed, you would not be held legally. There would be no legal jeopardy for you there, because that would be considered incidental take and you have a permit covering you for that.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Doreen?
Currently, we have 2 or 3 forest sites. If we acquire more, is that automatically, or is there steps or other things that need to be done in order to include future lands?
So I think that every year, so I know that the county forests all, like sometimes some lands get sold and sometimes some get added. So each year around the time when we're doing the annual report, we would just add or subtract any lands that were a part of that. But I think during the year, if you acquired something and we're going to manage it, we'd consider it covered underneath the permit. And we would get that added during the annual report. During the annual report time period.
Thank you.
Yep.
Are there other questions from the committee? Supervisor Wimmer?
Yes, I'd like to ask the bat person the question. I guess it's been my understanding that the northern long-eared bat, it doesn't go back to the cave in the summer.
This is Heather. I'm the bat biologist. Nice to meet everybody. Bats that hibernate in Wisconsin primarily have 2 different habitat types based on the time of year. When they're in winter, they're underground, hibernating in caves and mines, because those are the conditions where they can survive. And then in the spring, when they emerge and things start to be active and it warms up, they have the opportunity to go be active and forage. And so they'll disperse from these relatively few hibernation sites, suitable hibernation sites, to the broader landscape. And so that's when they're out on across Wisconsin in roosting in trees in summer.
Okay, and then as a follow-up to that, so these bats aren't like the northern long-eared, isn't like the brown bats, little brown, big brown, and the other bats that tend to find man-made structures, bridges, barns, people's attics and houses, and that type of thing.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, so are you saying that all long-eared bats, they don't go to those areas that are created by man?
There, we do have a couple instances where we found northern long-eared bats, and then some of the other covered species, the tricolored bat, in artificial structures, in cabins and things like that. But primarily, what we know about them is that they're going to trees. They roost in trees in summer.
And have you done any studies to actually go out and find these bats in the trees?
Correct. Yeah, we have. We spent we started in 2014. And what we do is we go out and we trap the bats on the landscape as they're flying around over a stream or something like that. We net them, and then we attach a little radio transmitter, and the transmitter emits a pulse, and we can follow that pulse, that signal to the specific roost tree. And then so we narrow down the tree. We go back in the evening to confirm the tree, so the bats will fly out in the evening to go and forage. So yeah, we've tracked probably a good couple dozen northern long-eared bats, and then 8 to 10 tricolored bats, and found them in trees primarily.
And then sorry, but I have another follow-up. What is it called? White nose bat syndrome?
Yeah, white nose syndrome. Yep.
Yeah. Is that just in a particular bat like the northern long-ear, or is that all bat? Have you found that in other bat species?
Yeah, so it's not species specific. However, the impact on the species can be specific. So any bat that hibernates underground is susceptible to white nose syndrome, because when they go into hibernation and they go into torpor, they suppress their immune system, they lower their body temperature to go into torpor and survive. And so the fungus takes advantage of that, and it can grow on them. And so any bat that hibernates underground can be susceptible. However, the northern long-eared bat it has seen extremely large declines because of white nose syndrome, followed probably by the tricolored bat and then the little brown bat. So that's primarily the reason why they're being listed.
So there's one thing that I should have mentioned when I did the background, and that is that this permit will also cover not only northern long-eared bat, but tricolored bat and little brown bat. The tricolored bat is expected to be listed by the Fish and Wildlife Service towards the end of this year, and the little brown bat is under review for listing. So I should have mentioned that those two species would also be covered by this permit. So if you joined and one of those species was listed in the future, you wouldn't have to do anything else because you're already covered for that.
And I have one further question. Where did this disease originate? I don't know if I remember in my lifetime if there's ever been a problem like the white nose syndrome.
Yeah, that's a good question. So the disease, nobody's really sure where exactly the fungus that causes the disease, where it came from. However, it started to show up. People started to see symptoms of it with fungal growth on the muzzles and the wings of bats in 2007 in New York, that winter, 2006, 2007. So it was brand new to science. Nobody had ever seen anything like this. And they started to see mass mortality, thousands of dead bats at the entrances of these caves and mines. And since then, it spread really quickly south and west. And so it reached Wisconsin in 2014. And within 2 years, all of our hibernation sites were infected. There was fungus found everywhere. We saw some pretty significant declines in across the board. But what other research has shown is that the fungus that causes white nose syndrome is found worldwide. There have been studies that have taken fungal samples from Europe and from Asia and found the fungus there, but it doesn't seem to have the same impact on bats on these other continents as it does here in North America.
Thank you.
Did you have a question, Supervisor Mons? Supervisor Mons?
Has anything been tried to reduce this fungus? Any pesticides that would have been used? Has that been done at all since
Yeah.
the fungus has shown itself?
Right, yeah, that's a good question too. So there's been a lot of efforts put into figuring out how we could potentially treat it or prevent its spread. One of the ways, the primary spread of the fungus is bat to bat. Bats move around a lot. They're flying across the landscape, sometimes hundreds of miles. So they're the primary transfer, but the fungus itself persists in sediment and soil. So in these hibernation sites. So, you know, potentially if somebody's crawling around and you get really muddy and then you go to the next site, you could potentially transfer the fungus that way. So one of the things we did initially was to try and prevent folks from accidentally transferring it among sites. We have a decontamination protocol, and we observe it too. When we go underground, we take everything off and we wash it in between sites. We don't wear the same thing in between. So limiting the spread was one initial thing that we tried to do. But there's also been research on, you know, whether there's ways to kill the fungus itself in the site or whether you can treat the bats. We've been working with the USGS National Wildlife Health Center on a vaccine. That's actually pretty cool because there haven't really been successful fungal vaccines. It's very hard to vaccinate against a fungus, but we've done several years of work with that, and they think they figured out something. There's also been questions about whether you can treat the site itself. So is there something that you can spray inside the site, for example, that would kill off the microbiome inside the site? And obviously you would only do that at a man-made mine. You wouldn't do this at a cave because caves are really sensitive, and there's often lots of really good beneficial bacteria and fungi that are in the sites as well. So yeah, there's been quite a bit of research on how to prevent it, but the problem is, if anybody has watched the new TV show, fungus are really hard to kill and really hard to control.
Thank you. Is that it? Any other questions? I have a few. And I don't know if Sarah or Heather can answer these. Sarah, you mentioned covered if you mentioned covered. If you sign on, you're covered. That's only if you're performing conservation measures, correct?
So yeah, so if you join the permit, we'd be making an agreement between with the DNR and your county where you would implement the conservation measures, and then you'd receive coverage from our permit. And so, like someone else pointed out, if there was, you know, there's a forest management project going on and a tree was cut down and then there was dead bats on the ground, the county couldn't be held legally liable then by the Fish and Wildlife Service or anything, because you had an incidental take permit, you are implementing the conservation measures, and so you're covered for this incidental take.
So when we're talking about an incidental take permit, is someone coming out and walking the land? How is compliance going to be enforced, I guess, is my question.
No, we're not coming out to monitor the site. There'll be, you know, we're relying on your forestry department staff as professionals to implement the conservation measures. And then to each year, there's a landowner enrollment program implementation questionnaire sort of that they would fill out and send to us so that we could include that information in our annual report. But we, you know, especially with the county forests, we have a close relationship with them, and we are relying on those foresters and staff to implement the conservation measures.
So you broke up just slightly. Did you say land and water staff or DNR staff? I guess I didn't.
No, I guess, I guess, I'm not sure exact, every county has like slightly different departments, so I was saying like your county forest staff, whoever that
Okay.
is, maybe that's
So
land and water
Yep.
department,
land and water.
sorry.
No problem.
It's a little different in each county, so, so yeah, like your land and water staff that manage the county forests, we'd rely on them as resource management professionals to implement the conservation measures and to submit the report to us each year.
Okay, so that was another question. So the annual report worksheet, it's due when? And you said it's the responsibility of land and water.
Yeah, so so the reporting year is the calendar year. And so each year at the end of, I believe that, I have to go back and look at the exact date, but I believe that counties and landowners who enroll in the landowner enrollment program, that information will be due at the end of March to the DNR. And then we have to submit our report to the Fish and Wildlife Service by the end of June. So I don't have a copy open right now to share with you, but I definitely can send someone a copy of what that worksheet looks like. If that would be helpful, and you tell me the correct person to send it to if people want to review that.
Dustin, would that be you or would that be Carolyn Prawley or?
That'd be me.
Okay.
Okay.
Would you like a copy of that?
I'm thinking once we enroll, we would get all that information, correct?
Yes, definitely. But sometimes some folks want to look at it ahead of time just to know what what they'll have to provide each year.
Yeah, you can certainly send it to me, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Again, either Sarah or Heather, pups, when do they emerge?
So it depends a little on the conditions. So the gestation period for bats is around 60 days. But when that's initiated is not really fully understood. So when bats actually mate in the fall before they enter hibernation, and then they delay fertilization and ovulation until the spring when they emerge. So that way they don't have to worry about mating right before they fly away. So there's some point, depending on when they emerge from the hibernation site, they'll become pregnant, and then they're pregnant for 60 days about. So usually we like to say that, bat birthdays are in Wisconsin are right around the first week of June, but that can extend anywhere from late May all the way into July for some of the species, depending on when they emerge. And then they're after they're born, they're then flightless for 2 to 3 weeks, maybe even a little bit longer.
So Heather, I guess for some reason I was thinking they were born in the caves or mines, but you're saying they're actually born in the roosts of the trees.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why these trees, maternity roost trees are so important, is because they give birth in the tree. Then the mother will actually leave the pup in the roost because she really can't carry the pup with her while she's going out to forage. So she might, leave the pup in the roost for 20 minutes to an hour, go out and forage, and then she'll come back and she'll nurse, and then repeat that over the course of the evening. And then return to the roost and take care of them for the day. So that's why these particular trees are so important, is because there could potentially be flightless pups left in the roost that can't escape if they get disturbed. And then there's also only so many types of trees that potentially are suitable for them, and they tend to be large trees. But we found them in everything from really old mature trees down to little tiny stumps on the ground. So
Okay. Interesting. Okay. For some reason, I thought the moms would go back to the young, which for whatever reason, I thought they were not in a tree. So, okay. Why is the time frame set for 50 years?
I believe that was because in Wisconsin, we have another federal incidental take permit. I'm not sure if Adams County is part of it or not. It's our blue butterfly HCP. And those permits are only good, that permit is only good for 10 years. So every 10 years, we have to go through a process with the Fish and Wildlife Service of revisiting that permit and, making changes, and it's quite a workload. And we also feel like for this species, like the conservation measures aren't really going to change. Forest management isn't a huge source of take for these species. And so we wanted a longer permit term that we wouldn't have to renew all the time, basically. And of course, if you do join and at some point you wanted to terminate your enrollment in the permit, you could do that.
Would the 50 years also have to do with the fact that tree growth is elongated over a quite a few year time frame?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so many of the stands will only be visited, forest management will only occur there, once or twice during the permit term, especially since the highest quality habitat for the sort of like northern hardwoods and things like that. So yeah, I mean, the forested land is just on a little bit longer time scale than, say, like the Karner, which is like more of an open habitat species. And so that is part of it.
Thank you. Is there anything else that's devastating to the bat population that's currently being studied beyond the migration and roost, such as effects of heavy metals, pollution, pesticides, and insecticides?
Heather?
So I apologize for the background noise. Yes. There have been studies on especially pesticides, because they tend to bioaccumulate in bats. So it accumulates in the fat, and then when bats go either migrate or they go underground to hibernate, they burn off those fat reserves. And so every time they do that cycle, it accumulates more and more in their bodies. So yeah, there's been some research on that. I can't speak to the heavy metals. It's really hard to study bats, partially because they're really hard to capture, but they're also really long lived. And that's part of the problem with these things that bioaccumulate, is that, yeah, it happens over a long period of time because bats are so long lived.
I will say that, and Heather can correct me if I'm wrong, but prior to the discovery of white nose syndrome in Wisconsin, our bat populations were actually doing pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, the primary source of mortality for at least the hibernating species of bats is white nose syndrome. It's caused a really devastating effect, had a really devastating effect on them. But there's also other sources of mortality, including wind turbines. Depending on where you place them, they can have some pretty high mortality. And then habitat loss in general for species that kind of need these specific either hibernation sites or roost trees to spend time in the summer or winter. If you affect them, you can certainly affect their population levels, just like many other animals.
Since I'm not aware of all the technicalities of WNS, white nose syndrome, is it possible when you find bats that are dead and have this fungus on them, that the fungus occurred after they died? Meaning, if, outside of the cave, they're all laying there dead, whatever is affecting them came from whatever, and now you see the fungus versus, no, it's definitely in a cave, it's definitely in a mine, and it's a fungus that's growing in there, and the bats somehow get it on them.
Yeah, it's a good question. So there have been quite a few studies to make the concrete link between this fungus and symptoms and mortality from the disease white nose syndrome. So it's definitely known that the fungus causes the disease. And it's interesting because after the bats die and they've been dead for a while, the fungus doesn't survive well on dead animals, on dead bats. So it actually disappears pretty quickly. But there is obviously other fungi that can grow on carcasses and things like that. But there's definitely it's been proven that white nose syndrome is caused by this particular fungus.
Okay, may you indicate to the committee members what the private landowner will need to do to comply if they wish to also be protected via the HCP and the take permit?
Yeah,
So go ahead.
Sorry. I was gonna say, there'll be an application, which I've already sent out to all the county forests, but will be available for private landowners that are eligible to enroll on our website soon. And so they'll fill out the application, which asks for the location of their land, some estimates of how much forest management they think they'll do, and things like that. And then they'll submit the application to us, and and this process, by the way, is pretty much the same for the counties, the county forests. They'll submit that application to us. We will draft an agreement that will outline, the conservation measures. It will say whether or not the lands have any of these special habitat features like hibernacula or known roost trees. And then we'll get that agreement back to them and they'll sign it, and then we will sign it, and then that landowner will be covered by the HCP.
Will it be the landowner's responsibility or the loggers to acquire this take permit?
It will be the landowner's responsibility.
Okay, so I don't know if you can see this. There's an Adams County timber cutting permit.
Mm-hmm.
Is it for us to update this so that landowners are aware of it? Because every landowner that harvests timber for resale needs to fill this out.
So I think for the county, your main interaction with this is going to be coverage for your county forest land and the land that you manage. Because not all landowners are eligible for this, because we don't have the resources to administer a program where every forest landowner in Wisconsin enrolls. And also on smaller parcels, the chance of take is just very, very low. It's insignificant. And so for northern long-eared bat and tricolored bat, with those species, those species are listed. No landowners under 10,000 acres will need to apply for incidental take coverage. If little brown bat becomes listed, that acreage threshold will drop to 500 acres. And it's also important to note that any landowner that has one of the special habitat features on their land or adjacent to their land, that is hibernacula or a known roost tree, they would be eligible regardless of how many acres their ownership is. And so for you, your county doesn't really have the responsibility of getting private landowners enrolled or anything. If someone asks you for information, you can direct them to Heather, to myself, or to Heather, and we can work with them to see if they're eligible and help them enroll. But I think what we're talking about here with you all and with the other county forests is just your county forest land that you're responsible for managing. Does that make sense?
It does. I've also seen where it affects the county and then it comes down to the landowner. So,
Okay.
and also we're all in this together. So if a landowner is on board with helping the bat population, it's nice for that information to be available to them. So
Yeah, and those landowners, what we're saying is that those smaller landowners, they don't need to apply. made the argument in the HCP, and the Fish and Wildlife Service has accepted it, that those small donors, the chances of take occurring is very, very small. They don't need incidental take coverage. So we're not like leaving them out there in legal jeopardy or anything. We've said that those small landowners don't need incidental take permit, and the Fish and Wildlife Service agreed with us.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? Supervisor Wimmer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. In reading over this, we're all for saving the bats. We're all for responsible logging. But it seems like you come in with such an agreeable thing, but then you have the heavy hand of the federal government waiting behind, that if you don't sign this, when we see a bat hit the ground, we're all gonna be all over you. And I don't think that's the way we like to do things in Adams County. We have many projects going with agriculture that we work hand in hand. And I'm not even sure if any of our loggers in this county even know about what we're doing here today. And I haven't seen where they're even stakeholders in this, because I read it, and it seems like down the road, once we sign, that we're open to all kinds of rules and regulations. For instance, it says that if you have a bat in your attic and you're doing some remodeling, you cannot do the remodeling until you have that bat removed in a prescribed manner, and the contractors cannot enter in and do the project. That was one thing I read. And the other thing I read was that so many of the bats are in man-made situations. Like we have barns, we have homes, and one of the things was you wanted to prevent sprawl, building new homes in timber areas. Well, we should be encouraging people to remodel their homes, not penalizing them because they have a bat in their attic. It just seems to me that it's really underneath all this. Once we sign, the power of the federal government is upon us. And as I read over it, landowners and people are responsible for these bat, for anything that has to be done before they can do anything on their private land. And the other thing that I find weird is that we have not even talked to our loggers about this, how they feel about it, or even our landowners. And for us to sign a resolution does not really make sense at this time until other people are involved in it and how they want to deal with it. Another thing I find rather strange is that the largest killer of bats is probably wind-powered energy, and they're exempt from these from this study.
So this particular permit is for forest management and forest management related activities. So things like removing bats from attics and things like that, and wind power, those things are outside the scope of this agreement. And I should also mention that we are not making anyone join this. So we obtained incidental take coverage for forest management on our lands, state lands. And if some of our eligible partners would like to join and obtain that incidental take coverage, then we would welcome that. But definitely up to you. Private landowners, most of them will not need any incidental take coverage because the chances of incidental take occurring on their land is very, very low. So they will not have to join. And I think for loggers, they don't need to join. The permit will be the responsibility of the landowner. So if they're working for someone, they don't need to obtain a permit. If the landowner is eligible, and most landowners won't be because the chances of take on their lands are very low, then that landowner is the one who would have obtained coverage for the incidental. But the other stuff, I don't disagree with you, but those things are sort of outside the scope of this permit.
But they are part of the study, which I would think that they'd be trying to be incorporated down the road. Why do the study if there isn't a follow-up on the study to come up with rules and regulations on how people can manage their property?
I can only speak for what's in this habitat conservation plan, and this, what's in this plan is what are the advantage of doing something like this is that then there are no surprises. Like the Fish and Wildlife Service can't come back to us later and be like, now we want you to do this when you're doing forest management, because we already had this agreement with them. We've already said, this is what we're going to do to try to avoid take of these bats during forest management. And so now they can't come back to us in 20 years or 10 years and be like, now we want you to do this, because we already have this agreement with them. And so this is, we've agreed that this is what we're going to do, and they can't surprise us by asking us to do more during forest management.
But your resolution does not save one bat. Not one. It
So
just prevents, excuse me, it just prevents us from the federal government coming in and with a heavy hand and saying, you're not in compliance, you killed a bat.
That is correct. And you're right, this habitat, this incidental take permit does not cure white nose syndrome. And white nose syndrome is really the issue that's driving the bat populations down. But for us on state property, the Fish and Wildlife Service told us forest management could be a source of illegal take once these species become listed as federally endangered. So we complied. In order to comply with the law, we obtained an incidental take permit, and we're giving folks the opportunity to join in that incidental take coverage if they would like to.
It sounds like a Trojan horse. The bat is the Trojan horse of this whole operation. We should be saving these bats and responsible forest management without the federal government interfering. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Meyer. Sarah, I have a question for you.
Sure.
And it just occurred to me as Supervisor Wimmer was talking. Other counties in Wisconsin are being asked to sign a resolution like we are today, correct?
They
Okay.
have the opportunity to join if they would like to, and some of them are, yes.
Okay, are some of them not?
I haven't heard that from anyone that they are not going to, but I don't know. They're in various stages of application and and so I don't know. I expect all of that most of the counties or all of the counties that have county forest land in the county forest law will probably join.
What happens if a resolution isn't passed? Other
I
than that,
guess
we're not covered.
right.
Right.
So I guess what I would advise you to do just to legally protect yourselves during forest management would be to consult on your own with the Fish and Wildlife Service about what you should do to avoid take.
At the beginning of your presentation or Q&A, you had mentioned that Adams County doesn't really have hibernacula. Sorry. So that's good, right? So should the committee wish to consider this further, it's not like we're going to have a problem if we postpone till next month. I'm not saying we are. I'm just saying that we don't have an high incidence of bat hibernacular law.
Right. Yeah,
Okay.
you don't have any hibernacula that I know of in Adams County that's on your county forest land or adjacent to it, nor any known roost trees. And I should also mention that, you know, enrollment will be ongoing. So there's not like a deadline where you have to enroll by. It'll be ongoing. So, you know, depending on various people's processes and things like that, it could take a while for some of the to get it going. So there's no deadline. And it's not, if you table it till next month, that won't impact you. I mean, the Wildlife Service has also told us that we have a grace period for getting this program up and running and implemented. So you wouldn't have to worry out of compliance.
Supervisor McLaughlin has a question. So hold on, Dustin. Go ahead.
Actually, I have a comment, and it is not directed at the presenter. It's a comment in general about something that was discussed just a short time ago. And that is, nobody could ever convince me that the feds can't come along and change something. Nobody will ever convince me of that. I mean, no, that's all I had to say, but no.
Dustin? Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to add to what you were talking about, like the timeline. We do have a harvest scheduled for this fall. As the county forest administrator, I'd feel a lot more comfortable having that incidental take permit in place prior to that. We don't have any hibernacula, but on the off chance that a bat shows up while we're doing that and something happens, well,
I think in that case, I mean, you know, probably the only conservation measure that you'd have to implement would be retention guidelines, whether you follow the state retention guidelines and the silviculture guide, or you have your own that have been approved by Division of Forestry or whatever. So if you were following those, and even if we were still working things out, you could say we're working towards coverage, and I don't think it'd be an issue. I mean, the Fish and Wildlife Service knows it's going to take a little while to get this going, so.
Sarah, one other question I have for you. An incidental take permit versus signing this resolution. Actually, the county could ask for an incidental take permit on the lands that they're doing the harvest without doing the resolution, which is more of a broader spectrum sign-on. Or am I misunderstanding this?
Right. So I think the resolution is mostly about like your processes in county government. What we need is if you decide to join, we'll get your application, we'll draft an agreement, and then you'll have a chance to look at it, or if you have legal review or whatever, and then you sign it, or someone that you've designated, your county board or whatever has designated as having the authority to sign the agreement with us. You sign it, and then we sign it, and that's the agreement. So the county, the resolution, like for some of the counties that have passed one, I think the important part for us is that it designates a person in the county that has the authority to sign the agreement. So I like as far as the draft resolution, that is, I think whatever is in that is mostly about like your processes and agreements. And what we need is just to know that there's someone that has the authority to sign the agreement.
But otherwise, the county could just take on an incidental take permit based on a harvest.
You mean as opposed to covering all your lands?
Right.
I guess the way that we've envisioned this working is not that we would give out separate incidental take permits to every, like on a stand by stand basis, basically. Like at harvest time that people would cover their lands, and then they wouldn't have to get a separate incidental take permit every time they did a forest management project. However, I mean, depending on, and this is our first time, you know, this is kind of new. So, you know, if there's a different a different, way of doing it that would work, we could look at that, I guess. But like, overall, what we were planning on is people enrolling their lands and then not having to do a separate permit for each stand when they're gonna harvest it.
Correct. Okay, Dustin?
And that's about what I was gonna say. So I think to answer your question, yes, you can apply for an incidental take permit on say a given 40 acres or
Yeah,
at a certain time for a certain project. At that point, you're dealing directly with Fish and Wildlife, and we would have to convince them that, yeah, even if something might die, it's accidental. Here's what we're doing to counter or to prevent that as much as possible. The information we would provide them would be
Would be the same.
exactly the information in there. And I guess the other part, and I know I've said this before and they've said it too, this entire document only applies to 140 acres in all of Adams County, nothing else. If you guys
right.
agree to it, it applies to our 140 acres of county forest land. If next year parks at the campgrounds want to maybe do a harvest, they could go through their committee and sign on with this, but it doesn't put one iota of restriction on any citizen in Adams County, any property owner, any logger, anything else. From the logger standpoint, when we put that harvest out for bid, like say this fall, they're going to be made aware that if you see a high vernacular out there, you need to stay at least a certain amount of feet away. But this does not put any restrictions on anybody else other than me.
Right, and I should mention that like for hibernacula and roost trees, this isn't, they're not, the hibernacula are caves and mines, so they're probably not going to discover a hibernacula up there. Heather can correct me if I'm wrong, but we think we know about all or the vast majority of the hibernacula in the state. The roost trees are ones that we know about, that's NHI data. And so we're not expecting loggers to go out and be like, this might be a roost tree. That they'll know, like, if there's a roost tree on your land, we would know about it because we've already have it in our NHI data. So there's not going to be any surprises that way as far as those special habitat features.
I wasn't so much thinking of it as a restriction. I was thinking of it as an opportunity to trigger attention to the possibility that there is a roost tree or whatever. I don't think
Right.
people just go out and look, up and, oh my,
Right.
I got one, right?
Right.
So that's why I was wondering if it could be on a per harvest basis to make more awareness occur than just
Yeah.
overall. So that's okay.
I just want, what, a per harvest basis for the
So
county
let's say
forest?
county forest, or moving forward, if a landowner gets on deck too, you have these prescribed harvests, you guys, county forest will too, right? I mean, you're not determining when you harvest your timber stand. It's more of a determination on maturity of the stand. So it's not an every year thing. And so I like the idea of a trigger, so that you are aware, or that county forest, we have staff attrition, right? So we also have landowners that come in, buy land, sell land, whatever.
Mhm.
It's a team effort, right? We want
Yeah.
to protect the bats.
Right, and
So-
and one of the things I guess that you could do is, and one of the reasons why we have the retention guidelines as one of the conservation measures, is that we know that these bats are pretty much habitat generalists. So we know that they're all over in the forested parts of the state. And we know about a very small number of the roost that they've used, because as Heather described to you, finding the roost involves like telemetry and netting and stuff. It's not easy to do, but we know that they're or they were before white nose syndrome, widespread in the forested areas. And so the retention guidelines to sort of call attention to the habitat features that bats need for good habitat. And that's like large trees with sloughing bark, things like that. So that conservation measure is kind of a nod to like what even if we don't know, if there's not like a known habitat element for the bat there, it's what the bats need for good habitat, good forest habitat. I might have broken up there a little bit. Sorry about that.
Yep, no, you did well.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Sarah and Heather, for joining us today and answering our numerous questions. Are there any more? Yep, Supervisor Wimmer has another.
Yes, thank you. So if we sign this resolution, are we part of this 450-page document? Or
No, so I think if you sign the resolution, it's giving your county land and water department basically your permission to apply for the program, apply, and then we'll draft an agreement that will be an agreement between DNR and Adams County for your county forest land. The HCP, that was our application to get an incidental take permit. So that's our application. You would be giving your, if you approve this resolution, this is my understanding, you'll be giving your land and water department permission to apply to receive incidental take coverage from us. And that will be an agreement that's, a few pages probably, that will be signed by us and by a person that you give authority to sign it for your county forest land.
Okay, but there's no strings attached to the 450-page agreement. If we
So-
sign this resolution.
No, so that the Lake States Forest Management BAT HCP is the agreement between us and the Michigan DNR and the Minnesota DNR independently and the Fish and Wildlife Service. So that's what gives us incidental take coverage on our land.
Are you done, Supervisor? Okay, Supervisor Mons.
I'm going to be a little bit negative here. So if we go ahead and sign or ask that our committee recommends that the resolution be adopted by Adams County, and I can foresee, I'm going to be negative, another discussion when the information comes back after Land and Water applies for the permit. You said that it could be a few page document. So if the resolution is signed and we don't like the document coming back, we can back out. Yes. or no?
Yeah. So yes, so the incidental take coverage will not be, the lands will not be covered by the incidental take coverage until you have signed the agreement and we have signed the agreement.
Thank you.
Yep.
Sarah, you had mentioned that you are going to forward an incidental take permit to Dustin or the agreement.
No, I think that was the, he was curious of, or you
Oh,
were all
annual
curious
report
about
worksheet.
what information we'd be asking for like annually from you.
Okay, so backing up then, based on what Supervisor Moan said, do you have examples of hold on, incidental take permit, and do you have examples of the agreement that counties have been signing?
Well, we don't have any counties that have reached the agreement stage yet. We do have a draft agreement, although it's still being reviewed by our legal folks. So I can't share it just yet, but I will as soon as I can. It would just be, I could send you like a draft template or something that wouldn't contain any of the Adams County specific information. But like what you have to see in the agreement, if you decide to go forward with this, is a description of what lands you're covering, basically where they are, estimates of the amount of harvest that you expect to do, I think annually, or we could base it on your 15-year plan if that was easier. Information about whether or not there were special habitat features on or to the county forest land that's known roost trees or hibernacula, which I don't think there are in Adams County. So those would be the main things that you'd see in the agreement. And it would outline the conservation measures that you would be expected to follow based on what's on your land. So that's what you'd see in the agreement.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah.
Doreen has a
Reiterate that.
question.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna follow up and just say that you know, I mean, Dusty's the one that ultimately has to follow the plan. So if he saw concerns, then I would say that we wouldn't sign it or go forward with it, but he's the one that has to follow through with it.
Thank you, Doreen. Supervisor Mons?
I think we should move to item B on our agenda,
Okay,
where we're discussing either signing it or not signing it. I mean,
Correct.
we're at that point now, we're in that part of the agenda, so.
correct. Is everyone comfortable moving forward? Questions have been asked to Sarah and Heather. Okay, moving on.
Should Heather and I drop off or are there
You
potential-
can certainly drop off. Thank you both so much for joining
Yeah.
us for all the questions.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Okay, I'd entertain a motion. Go ahead Supervisor Mons, I'm sorry.
I'm just, okay, first to discuss it, we have to have a motion. I recommend that we ratify. Is that the correct word?
Approve.
This resolution to go to the county supervisors for their acceptance.
I'll second that.
So Supervisor Mons for a motion to approve and move towards county board, and Doreen second. Okay, so now it's on the floor and it's open for discussion. Go ahead Supervisor Mons.
I'm going to back up to last month. And Madam Chair, I'd either like to see this move forward or we drop it. I am going to complain a little bit with our time this month and last month. We're almost 3 hours on this subject. I'm going to say that our Land and Water Committee had this since January. And I would like to bring up at last meeting, any question that was asked of Dustin on this entire scope of the agreement, he had it right on the computer. The Land and Water is recommending that we sign this. And I don't know if it's for a personal protection or whatever, but when we have as much work as I believe that this department has put into this document, and realizing and him saying, yes, we are totally aware of what we would have to do to make this work. So that's my point. I believe that they have done their due diligence in this, and that's why I'm making that motion to have it signed.
Is there any other comments from the floor? Go ahead Supervisor Rummer.
Madam Chair, first we saw this document was last month, not January. It was last month, and but we didn't see it. And secondly, I'm still not satisfied that if we sign that document, we're not responsible for the 450-page document. That is what we're going into next.
The HCP. Go ahead. Hold on, Doreen.
And I'm still not convinced of that. And I had to have a hard time taking this before the county board until, in my mind, that question is answered. Because it's just going to lead to more questions.
Thank you. Doreen?
First, I think that answer or that question was answered. Secondly, once you get the agreement, it's going to have to go through legal counsel. Am I correct? So it'll have to go through county legal counsel before, and I would hope we would have competent enough attorneys reviewing our agreements to know whether or not we are getting into something way over our head and beyond the scope of what is intended.
Thank you, Doreen. Supervisor McLaughlin?
Thank you. Back to my earlier comment about the feds changing. All of us make decisions every day of our life based on what we know now and what the way things are now. I mean, everybody gathers that, I'm assuming. I mean, your auto insurance stuff could change on you, and anything can change on you. And like I said, the Fed, my God, nobody's ever gonna tell me they can't change nothing. That aside, I'm in favor of doing this because we can ask questions until the sun never rises again, and you're still not gonna eliminate some of those issues. Like I said, don't tell me the feds can't change anything. I mean, that's a ridiculous statement to make. So that, I'm just saying, I'm for it, and delaying it, we're not gonna get some magical answers from above, I don't believe, so. That's all.
Supervisor Mons.
There was a comment that we can pull out whenever. We can stop being a part of the permit or whatever. We can stop that at
The
any time.
agreement.
The agreement at
Yep.
any time.
So I just had a couple comments in regards to us being aware. Yes, Land and Water had it at the end of January. I was told that we didn't have any actionable items for February, which delayed this by one whole month, which is fine. It doesn't matter. So we're kind of playing catch up and we're addressing it. I think the presentation last month that you said took a fair amount of time was very indicative of what this plan is about. So I think we all needed to have that education to make a decision. Second, I would agree that to me, it's pretty much a no-brainer in terms of what this resolution does, and that is to allow county forests to move forward on their harvest with the protection of an incidental take permit based off of the HCP plan. So if there's no other questions, I'd like to take a vote.
One more point. Madam
Yes.
Chair. Yeah, we're not the only ones that haven't signed, only county that hasn't signed this agreement. I think according to what she's saying, most counties have not signed this. And I think there's good reason, because to me, I think corporate counsel should look at this. Once we sign this and you take it to the board, and even if the board approves it, what are the consequences? On paper, right here, it says it's just county forest, but does it extend into the next phase? That's my only question right now. I don't want to see it extend into the next phase. I fully understand the pressure to get this done so that we can have an uninhibited harvest. But I think to me, it raises serious questions, and I'm sorry, in most people's mind, this has taken up too much time, but to me, there's a lot of undercurrent in here that I'm not satisfied has been answered.
So Supervisor Wimmer, may I ask you a question?
Sure.
Are you under the understanding that we're again getting the cart before the horse? So if we had knowledge of the annual report worksheet and we had knowledge of not a draft agreement, but an actual agreement, and if we had an example of an incidental take permit, would that make you more comfortable in how you perceive this resolution moving forward?
Personally, the more information that's specific to us would be advantageous.
Yes, Supervisor Mills. Thank you, Supervisor Wimmer.
I'm sorry, but because we're asking for approval on this, it's not the end all. We still have the opportunity to review the incidental take permit. We have the ability to give that to council. We have the ability to look at that before that's even approved. So just because we are signing or recommending the signing of the resolution, the document needs to be approved. The actual document that either Land and Water or county or whoever is the authoritative figure to sign it, that is still not approved until signed.
Correct, but it is no longer under our purview either. Correct? It would, this resolution, if I'm reading it correctly, be it further resolved that the county forest administrator, which is you, Dustin, right? Be authorized to sign the agreement and submit this document to the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. So I understand where you're coming from, Supervisor Wimmer. Are we basically signing a blank check? We're under no time pressure. So do we wait for everything to be under our attention, under our microscope? I understand where Supervisor Mons is coming from too. So with that in mind, Let's take a vote. And let's do it by roll call. So Supervisor Mons? Supervisor Wimmer? Supervisor McLaughlin?
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
Well, maybe it's a little harsh what I'm gonna say, but I'm just gonna say, I'm sure glad we're only have 140 acres to discuss here, because if it was anything sizable, we'd be here until next month.
It would be the same principle, Phil.
Well, that part I understand what you're saying, Bill, but I just.
Doreen?
Yes.
And I will vote no. You're right. So, but majority has it. So if everyone would come, do we need to have signatures on this? So based on the roll call vote, Scott Krug is not here. So we have a majority of in favor of passing the resolution. So please come up at the end of the meeting and sign. All right, are there any nays? Obviously, Wimmer and Shapey was a nay. The resolution is approved and will be considered by county board. Land and Water staff report. Are there any questions for Land and Water staff or Dustin?
Madam Chair, I'm terribly sorry, but you said it was out of our hands. He reports to this committee. So when he gets that document, I don't believe that he will not, he will bring that, will bring that document back to this committee.
Absolutely, but he does not have to.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any questions for Land and Water staff or Dustin for the Land and Water staff report or the annual report? Go ahead.
I have a question on the, I don't know what her position was that she's gone. Are you?
Megan, program
Yes,
coordinator.
Yes. And are you interviewing? Is that advertised or what might be going on there?
As of right now, it's undecided. I think anytime a position becomes open or vacant, it's always on the table for whether it'll be filled or not. And I don't, a final decision hasn't been made yet, working on what her various what the various responsibilities of that position are. Program coordinator was her title. The various responsibilities and if it can be done more efficiently, or if there's a way to do it elsewise. But that decision has not been finalized yet.
Thank you.
Who's all involved in making that decision?
The initial parts of it would be Cynthia, myself. I don't know if admin and finance makes the final decision on that or not. I
Don't know.
don't know the answer to that final part. But that's certainly one of the county manager's primary functions is to evaluate positions like that.
So is it an opportunity for the committee members to reach out to County Manager Haggard if they have any kind of comment to make in terms of the need or other things to consider? I would assume so. So I'm gonna put that out there. Because I'm sure County Manager Haggard would welcome any kind of input. So,
Part of my question is based on that, because often people that are making this decision aren't in the trenches day to day, knowing whether it's actually needed or not. So,
correct.
And I can add to that, I mean, she's made it very clear that she's taking my recommendations into account for sure. Not end all be all, but yeah, she's not, I do not get the feeling whatsoever that she's making that decision absent more closely related input. I guess is maybe the best way to put that.
I have a question on the report. What is the McGrath HR questionnaire and what was its purpose? Some of the staff members had completed a questionnaire.
Yep, that's the pay scale or the wage study.
Can you indicate what that is?
Sure. So anytime any company or county undertakes a wage study, one of the first things that happen is the consulting company would send out a questionnaire getting into more detail about, okay, what does each position do? Levels of responsibility. Do you handle financial parts? Do you have supervisory duties? So each of and this is all county employees, including department heads, had to fill this out. My understanding going from there is the company takes that, compares it to other counties, and then even within the county, similar positions or various levels to come up with the final wage study.
Do you have any findings on this yet for the comparisons or for input?
No, I think it's,
How our staff perceives things?
I guess I don't, I mean, how the staff perceives things, I don't know if that really fits in. This is strictly name your 5 primary job duties.
Okay, because you had said, I thought you said supervisory or,
Right. So if like, when I filled out my questionnaire, one of the questions was, do you have supervisory responsibility over other staff?
okay,
So then I have to go in and put each position's name. There was another question about gives 5 examples of outside agencies that you are in
contact with or interact
formal
with?
communication with, and 5 within the county that you are in communication with. They use it to see, okay, I mean, and then there's even questions about if you make a mistake, what are the ramifications? Is it a oops kind of situation, or is it you just cost the county a couple $1 million type?
Okay,
Or, I mean, there's a lot more with that. I'm oversimplifying it. But that relates to
your wage.
your wages. Yeah.
Okay, so roles and responsibilities
That's what it is.
and wage basis. Okay, yes, Supervisor McLaughlin, thank you. Supervisor McLaughlin?
Thank you. Who's doing the study?
McGrath.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Yep.
Were they involved with the county before ever?
I don't think so. Not while I've been here.
I get where I'm kind of going with this is, I've discovered over several years, it's very common that board members, citizens think zoning department is a zoning department is a zoning department. I'm here to tell you, there are likely no 2 counties that are alike in respect to what department heads are responsible for and things. And in the past, in studies, they weren't thorough enough and things like that were not taken into account. And it's, for one thing, there is probably no other of the other 71 counties that has a building inspector employed by the county. They all probably got a desk for a contracted one. But there's a difference, because when you're, then the county is enforcing that ordinance as well as everything else. So that right there, I know that for many years, Adams County was the only county that did that.
So Supervisor McLaughlin, just to verify, you're saying crossover between departments, so
Well, I'm saying
planning,
that-
I know Dustin's over both.
Right, I'm just saying that I'm glad to hear, it sounds like they're doing a thorough study where they're gonna tap to find these things out. And I'm saying, I was here in the past when some of the study was done and it wasn't that thorough. I mean, they're like, well, it's a zoning department, what? Yeah, but I'm just here to say that sounds like these people are gonna do a good job because they're digging into the specific, this county, not just what they have, what they think goes on there.
Yep, we're unique. Go ahead, Dustin.
And yeah, just to add to that, I mean, before they sent out the questionnaire, we had, McGrath sat down with, well, virtual, but sat down with each department head. Actually, it was, I think about an hour-long interview, something along those lines. And some of the questions they were asking was actually what, word for word, what he just said, where, okay, what's unique about, is there something we need to know that you probably do different than other areas so we can watch for that? My gut says they're on the right track. I mean, they're at least digging, that's for sure. What the end result, and then, like I said, we are, I think, in the pretty early stages. I meant to answer that before. The deadline for all employees to have them done was on the 19th. And then last Friday, once they did it, then it came to the supervisor. I couldn't change any of their answers, but I could make comments and add to it. I think I had 2 weeks to do that. So I think it was might be this Friday, actually, I'm sorry, for the deadline to do that.
So then they're still accumulating their findings, and then Adams County will be aware of.
Yeah, where they go from there, that would be a much better question for.
County Manager Haggard. Okay, will do. Doreen, thank you.
One comment that, and you probably can't answer, is that if they take into account the cost of living, I know that there's other agencies, let's say, that have done studies, wage studies, and compare, let's say, Wisconsin Dells versus here, and that's not a great comparison. So.
But you don't know.
I'd assume they take it all into consideration, but I mean, that would be a great question for like HR, county manager.
Doreen, I can ask her that when I ask her about the findings. So, yep. Okay.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, Supervisor Wimmer.
Dustin, what is the Dostal clay pit and is it an active pit?
It's a mine, right on 11th, north of the town of Adams Town Hall. And over by the,
Intersection of J and 11.
thank you. He hasn't taken anything out. He is currently paying the inactive fee. It's been there for 10, 11 years, something along those lines. We're in the process of getting his reclamation plan up to meet the current standards.
Does he have reclamation to do now or just in the future? Or he or
Future.
She, I don't know who it is.
But in the future.
Okay,
It's not where we're saying you have to go in and do this
okay.
today, once he's completed his mining activities, or, okay, well, I've done this part and I'm moving on to the next few acres, then you would go in and.
Do we know how many acres that is?
Give me about 30 seconds.
I was just curious, so,
During that
thank you.
checking. Yeah,
Yes, Supervisor
while he's looking that up.
Owens. Yep.
If the new cell is approved at
Solid waste.
solid waste, we're gonna need a lot of clay.
All the clay they got, almost all the clay they got for the current cells came from our property, so I don't think that's true. For free. Literally. They were supposed to do a couple things and they did one, and the other one they said.
The total site is, what he owns there is 80 acres. Active, or what is encompassed by the mine is about 29. So it's not the whole 80.
Any other questions? Okay. Annual report that was linked to our, am I getting those out of order? Maybe I am. Maybe that one
They're
should
right.
have come. Okay. Excellent job. I think it really showed what has been achieved.
And I think I just want to shout out, I think Megan did a phenomenal job putting it together. And she's done the last 5, I mean, it is one of the duties she had. But it's very well laid out, and she's also the one that's always, no matter what we're doing, hey, make sure we get some pictures, and it's,
Right.
for this, so.
Yep.
Might consider that contract labor in the future. I don't know if that's what that's called.
Yeah. So are there any questions for Dustin on the annual report? I should ask, how did the tree sale go?
Good. We had increased we aimed higher this year. We did fall short of our new goal, but we about $2,000 higher than we did last year. But I think we had upped it by 4,000. So we did fall short of that, but we are moving in the right direction. Obviously, if we don't sell those trees, we don't have that associated cost. About 180, not about, it was 182 orders we had taken. We're still working through the final numbers. Pickup was over the last
Right.
Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or else Thursday, Friday. And so the final numbers aren't completely together yet, but once I know those, I'll bring those back. So,
Okay.
but I thought it was successful.
And the size of the trees and shrubs, 2-year, 3-year
Variety.
size.
Yeah.
So the maturity of the seedlings? The only reason I ask is because I have heard from numerous people that Adams County does a fabulous job in getting really good rootstock. So I'm just hoping that with the increase, maybe word of mouth is getting out there and we still have really good rootstock coming in. So,
Yeah, and I think a lot of that comes because we do a bulk order with Marquette County. We have 3 different nurseries, I believe we source from. I guess I'd put that more that those nurseries are doing a really good job. The ages of the stock we're getting is varied. I guess it by species, same with size. I know last year, one of the types of trees we got, I think was almost 3 foot tall. I don't know how that happened, but generally you're looking in the 18-inch range. Again, it depends on the species. But.
sure. Supervisor McLaughlin, sorry about that. Is your microphone on?
Sorry,
No worries.
question, for Dustin. What process is used to pass out the trees to the customers? In other words, if you are the first one to order, are you sure to get your order? I asked this because years back, I used to buy trees every year. And there was a year, and then nobody that did this was on staff anymore. But one year I was the very first person to put in an order, and I didn't get my trees because they were given away to people as they showed up. And I was the first one to order. Don't mean jack. They gave away my trees. So I'm just hoping that it isn't like that anymore.
No, every year we kind of have an after action report, sit down, what went right, what went wrong. Our goal is to make it better for next year. So the odd part about a tree sale, Megan put the order in, I want to say October or November. And then we try to sell the trees. So, and the way it is set up now is if you're the first person to order, she has a running list. So if you're number 1, you get whatever you pick. As the list goes down and, okay, we're out of white pine for order number 130 and on, white pine won't be available. So it is beneficial to order early. The hard part every year is, okay, how many of any given tree? We're not ordering based off of orders we've received. We're ordering trees based off of what we think is going to happen in previous numbers. But it is, the trees come in and by size, maybe a few thousand of each kind, whatever. We have our order sheet. We start with number one. We go around and pick orders, put it in a garbage bag or whatever, set it off to the side, put a tag number one. So if you were the first person to call, we do all those orders, but we do it starting at number one and down. And those trees are committed to you.
And then say in your White Pine example, if they were spoken for, then that person is notified, or so they can make a different choice if for other availability, or they don't get charged for that.
Right,
Portion.
so as the process goes on and people want to order, if they call in or if they send in a form, we would immediately respond, say, we don't have that anymore. Do you want something else, or do you just want your $15 or, so that's the process we use. So they are notified immediately. There was a small mix up at the nursery where we were shorted a few bundles of a certain species, so that we did have to then contact those people who thought they were getting them. But again, we did actually start at number one and work our way down. So it was the last few that we ended up having to call and say, hey, thought we had your trees, but
Don't, yeah.
they didn't make it on the truck.
Got it. I know that, and I don't know if it happened this year because I wasn't part of the purchasing. Too much to do, can't plant them this year. Usually the website also has where we're sitting for this is still available, this isn't available and whatnot.
Does
So,
do that.
okay.
It,
All right.
it was because I had someone asking for actually to get them off my property out of our woods, some little spruce trees or whatever like that. And I'm like, oh, Land and Water has a sale, and I sent it right off to them.
Sounds good. Okay, anything else in terms of the annual or the annual? Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, I would entertain a motion to send the annual report to county board. Supervisor Mons has made a motion. Supervisor McLaughlin has seconded it. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. Motion has passed. So the report will be sent on. Thank you. Okay, number 16 was removed. Number 17, dams report.
All right, so for the most part, no new news. We are still working through the Cottonville Dam, the repair that needs to be done. We had a couple of more boils that have been noticed. I hesitate saying that they just started because when they're underwater, sometimes it's tough. We are working with the state dam engineer, our privately hired engineer, and our contractor to figure out what needs to be done and what kind of time frame we're looking at. Where we're settled on right now, because of the three of them, we're concerned. There's a general consensus that there must be something going on, that they all showed up at the same time. So we want to make sure before we go in and repair any one of them, that we're not just going to keep having this issue. So our Ayers and Associates are going to be putting together a monitoring and testing plan that they'll be carrying out. Basically, they're doing a very deep dive investigation into why this is happening. Right now, the plan had been to do it this year, and now we're wondering, or not wondering. The idea is if the DNR is okay with it and we don't see any immediate danger, we'd like to hold off till next year, allow time for this investigation so we know exactly what's going on, a better plan of attack. The other really huge benefit is the municipal dam grant cycle is a 2-year cycle. The applications for that will be due on March of 24. And you can use that for repairs. So if we hold off, the hope is that we are successful in the grant, which Adams County has been in the past. And we can utilize some of that money to repair the dam as opposed to just out of the county's pocket. As long as we don't do any work before the dam is all covered, or it would potentially be covered. The investigative portion, that part, my understanding is can go retroactive. So we can do that now. Apply for the grant in March. If we're successful, it pays for the repairs and the investigative money that we spent this year.
Could you educate the committee, myself particularly, on what a boil is?
We're,
I know that, but I'm wondering when we're talking about dams, you
Nope.
know.
it's water bubbling up out of the concrete.
Okay,
There's. And I'm not on the, so I won't even be able to share it. I will send you out a picture of what a boil is. So on the spillway on the downs, there's a concrete run raceway out of the dam. And you can actually see it. You can go out there today and probably see it. There's about a, however big around your fingers, 3/4 inch hole. And you can see water bubbling up out of the floor of the concrete.
and there's 3 of them.
There's
Then-
one there and then there's 2 on the down after you get past the road.
Okay,
Now you're out into the mouth of the spillway. And it's lined with concrete on the sides and there's a couple of these, or in that general vicinity, there's one on each side. One was noted in the review that, or the required engineering report done last spring. Then all of a sudden there was another one found this year. So it could have been there, might not have been. At this point, I think we need to get more definitive answers before we spend any money on the concrete repair.
sure.
Um,
Because, you know, you stick your finger in one, you might make 2 more.
and
so-
that's exactly the concern.
Right,
Or even if we don't seal it, is there something going on that even if we don't do anything, there, another one's gonna pop up in June? Or is it high waters forcing it up, or I mean, time of year? So there's a few unanswered questions beyond that one. It was something that was identified in the report as having to be fixed. But let's find out why it happened.
but not an emergency.
Out of everything that we need to deal with at the dam, that was the one that we need to take care of. I think it was how it was worded, like in the next year.
Okay,
The same company that wrote that is the same ones doing the investigation now.
okay,
So during that, we're also going to be stepped up monitoring of that dam. And they're going to give us a very detailed, okay, if you see this happening, you need to do this, this, and this. If this happens, well, you know, that way we know what to look, or specifically what to look for in terms of that boil, getting better, worse, dangerous.
okay. All right, thank you. Anything else?
No.
Okay. Any questions for Dustin regarding the dams report? Seeing none, county forest report.
All right, so we will be submitting that application, the Nels Nelson Stewardship Fund application. I'm guessing it's going to get emailed off either yet today or tomorrow. We did get our appraisal back, and we've been working through the application, making sure it's everything we can, any good information we can put in there. We will email that off to the DNR, the person in the Division of Forestry. He'll review it, and if we miss something, or he thinks he's the one with the experience, all the applications go through him, so he knows like what joint finance is looking for. So right now we're gonna wait to see what his read on it is, and if we need more information, or Carolyn's put a ton of time into it, and she did a great job in filling out the application. There's a few narrative parts, and she really characterized the situation quite well. What I would ask the committee, and at some point here, whether it's next month, preferably, I think to start the conversation, at least next month, we should, if you guys are amenable to it, have a closed session,
Land acquisition
land acquisition, so we can discuss
offer.
yes.
Okay,
We have our appraisal, and by then the DNR should have their appraisal back. So we have that information. And we can share hard numbers and get your guys' input on that. Or, yeah. But I do think it needs to be done in a closed session.
all right. Sounds great. Any questions for Dustin regarding county forest? Supervisor Mons?
Out of order.
Okay. Lake Alliance report. I don't know if Bill is on or not. He was, but he's gone. So, actually, is that Scott Krug for participate? I honestly don't remember what district Scott's in. 19? Okay, so it's not. Oh, you're 20. Okay, so you're okay, got it. He's 18. Okay. Okay. Going forward to the Lake Alliance report, I don't see Bill on. It was attached to our agenda. So tonight, there will be an ACLA meeting. I don't know if anyone's interested in attending, but that's at 6:30, maybe. So if you're interested in attending, let me know. Were there any questions on
Comment?
the report? Bruce, you attend those, don't you?
Yes, I will not be at this evening's one. However, they're having a very difficult time finding a
Replacement for Chuck.
replace. I don't know what that title is.
It's a citizen.
Correct. They're having a
volunteer.
very difficult time.
Okay. All right. All right, we're gonna move on. FSA, Doreen.
I don't have anything to report. Our next meeting is July 6th, so.
July 6th. All right. Thank you. CSGCC, the neonicotinoid, it's almost as bad as the bat one, and nitrate event went off really, really well. Supervisor Wimmer was there in person. I was also, there were people virtually, and very informative. It'll be interesting to see where it goes. So that was held in April. The end of month April meeting at Hancock was not held because of the event. The next meeting, I believe, is May 22nd at the Hancock Agricultural Research Station. So I will be attending that, and I will let you know what is discussed. DATCAP report, timing wise, was not connected to the agenda. So yes, it was. Yep. So hopefully you had an opportunity to review what was sent. Financials, they are, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Sorry to interrupt, because she's making the same face I am. When did you get that?
The DATCAP?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, well, was it yesterday? I think it was yesterday. Hold on. Hold on. Hot off the press. So it was this morning at 10:30. Yep,
At 10:30. Okay, so that would have been after our conversation.
yep, yep.
Man,
And I saw it and I thought, well, I didn't know who was on it, so no problem. Okay, are we good? Go ahead, Supervisor Mons.
Is she even on the list to get that?
She should be. Yeah.
Okay, because then I'm a little concerned that she didn't get a copy of that, because if she's in charge of the agendas right now, she needs to be
Yep,
copied. So thank you.
Melissa. There we go. Okay. Financials, the financials were attached this morning. Thank you for doing that. Are there any questions on them? Seeing none, we will move forward and set the next meeting date, and I believe that's going to be June 6th. June 6th at 1 PM in this room. Does that fit with everybody's schedule? Hopefully it does. Because we already had this conversation. So, okay, 1 PM on June 6th. And the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for attending.